Of course Jesus beat Satan after 40 days of fasting. Can anyone defeat someone who's hangry? Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to Espresso with Sky, giving you a fresh perspective on faith, life, God, and the Bible. I am Pastor Sky, and these are my two sidekicks. If you haven't done so, go ahead and hit the subscribe, like, whatever you want to press. However, the most important thing, leave a comment below. Would love to hear your honest opinion on today's topic. And if you want to support this ministry, we got PayPal and buymeacoffee.com. All right, guys, let's begin. Jesus' ministry lasted 3 years, but it began with a very significant event. It was a rematch 4,000 years in the making. In the first match, it was Satan versus mankind, Adam and Eve. But we all know the result. Adam and Eve lose the battle, and there is the fall of mankind, and death reigns the entire 4,000 years while Satan sits atop the throne of earth. Yes, it sounds very Star Wars and Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings. But that's what it is. Jesus comes, the Messiah, the true king, to restore balance in the universe. He has to destroy Satan and bring salvation to all people. Now, Satan will not give up the throne very easily in this winner-take-all battle. So what are we going to do today? We're going to take a look at the 40 days of fasting with the 3 temptations, and we're going to figure out what do they mean and why is it important to us, all right? So let's get into the 3 temptations. Let's get into the first temptation of Christ. And of course, you'll find the whole story in Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. So let's get into it. So what happened here? The background is 40 days of fasting in the desert. I don't know about you guys. I've tried fasting before, 7 days twice in my life, inside a nice house with air conditioning, blinds. I have a bed, water, everything I need. I don't know what it would be like if you fasted 40 days in the desert. Like, that is unimaginable to me. At the end of the 40 days, he is tempted to make food. And you know what Satan does? He didn't do a very good job. You know why? Because he said, turn this rock, turn this stone into bread. I'd be like, no, I'm going to change it to a cheeseburger. Or I'm going to change it into a nice steak. I'm going to change it to something much more delicious than that. That's not a good temptation because bread is nothing. But when I really think about it, after 40 days, any food is good. I actually have a pastor who fasted 40 days once, and he said that after 40 days, just a couple of grains of salt felt like a meal to him. So this is something I'm like, wow, I couldn't imagine. The bread must be that tempting. Now, what does Jesus do? And if you look at verse 4, after he's tempted to turn the stone into bread, Jesus says, man does not live by bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Jesus stayed with God. He trusted in God no matter how depleted or how deprived he was in this situation. What is the first temptation? The first stage of temptation we go through, it is purely physical. It is a deprivation of provisions or deprivation of your physical basic needs. The thing that we desire so much every day at the most basic level is food. And we realize that as babies. When you're babies, we realize how important eating is that we don't even know what food is, and everything we grab goes straight into our mouth, even though we don't know it's food or not. In life, it's the same thing. When Satan comes to tempt, what happens? It is the deprivation of the basic necessities that cause us to get angry, cause us to be irritated, causes us to make bad mistakes. Think about this. When are people irritated? When they're hungry. That's why we call it hangry, right? When are people so angry and just start snapping at people? When they're so tired, haven't had enough rest. It's at the very basic level. And we have to realize too, in that situation, just like Jesus, where he's so hungry, he even sticks with God. He doesn't turn. He does everything he still needs to do, and he even quotes the words of God. And for us too, that's where we need to be to overcome Satan. That these physical needs shouldn't be the barrier between me and my faith in God. That is the first temptation, the deprivation of provisions or the deprivation of our physical basic needs. Now let's get into the second temptation. What happens here? Satan takes Jesus to the highest point of the temple and says, throw yourself off, which isn't a very good temptation because I don't know anyone who would do that. But he follows it with a Bible verse and says, God's going to protect you. Look what the Bible says. Jesus looks at him and says what? He says in verse 7, do not put the Lord your God to the test. Now this is really scary. Why? Because Satan uses the Bible against Jesus, and he will use it against us. If we don't know the words of God well, if we don't know God very well, then when Satan uses the scripture against us, we're going to have no idea what to do, and we're going to fall into temptation. We need to know the words of God well. We need to know God well so that we can respond like Christ. In this situation, he's like, look, can't you do this? And she's like, no, this is not it. Now, what kind of temptation is this? It is the deprivation of protection. And we're like, huh? What do you mean deprivation of protection? Well, more importantly, think about this. It's the deprivation of emotional needs. Feeling protected. Oh, if this happens to me, will God protect me? Will God be there for me? It is an emotional need. This is why all the time, why do we falter and make bad mistakes? Because of emotional responses. We think these crazy thoughts, even though there's no reason to think this way. Do they still love me? Does God still love me? Does God know what I'm going through? Oh, is God still there? We begin to doubt and distrust God. And this is what makes us falter all the time. This second level of temptation is your emotional deprivation. We're wondering if God is still there. We're wondering if God still loves me. We're wondering, oh my goodness, there's so much uncertainty. We're going through it right now. During the pandemic, people lost their jobs, people lose their businesses, and in their hearts, they have this emotional response. It's like, oh my goodness, God, are you there? Can you see what I'm suffering? Can you see what I'm going through? I can't even provide for my family. God, please help us. But instead, we're like, no, God, you're not there. I gotta do this on my own. No, you're not gonna help me. I doubt. I distrust. But what did Jesus do? Jesus is like, you're not gonna shake my trust. Just because something like this, you're gonna tempt me with this, you think that's gonna shake my trust, my love, and make me doubt in God? And that's the same way we should be, regardless of the emotional situation of how bad things are. Can you imagine if Jesus was as emotionally fragile as us when he's getting whipped and beaten on the way to the cross? Can you imagine what we would have done? Okay, I give up. No, I don't want to do this anymore. We give up. But Jesus never let go of God, never doubted, and never stopped loving God. There was a deprivation of protection, a deprivation of emotional needs. And that's the second level of temptation we all go through. And we know, we've gone through in our life, we make terrible decisions when it's like a response to some emotional thing, right? This is why we buy bad things at the shopping mall, because someone's like, oh, come on, everyone's doing it. Oh, come on, it's so cheap. You don't even need it, but you bought it because it's cheap. That's what happens. We respond emotionally to these things. And that is the second temptation. So let's go into the third and final temptation of Christ. And this is a really interesting one because it's the most powerful one, yet many people think it doesn't really apply to them. And here, Satan says to Jesus, look, everything you see I will give to you as long as you come and worship me. And of course, Jesus, verse 10 says, worship only God and no one else. And he quotes the Bible again. Now here it's like, well, what kind of deprivation is this? What is Satan offering Jesus? It's obviously power and authority, right? This is the deprivation of power and authority. But to us, we're like, most of us don't really care about being like president of whatever country we're in, or like the ruler of the world. None of us care about that, really. But if I put this in other terms, it's deprivation of social needs. And you're like, what do you mean by social needs? Like, what does that mean? Social needs is in society where you stand. What is your status? Because power and authority doesn't mean like number one in the world, like the big CEO or the ruler of the world. It's also talking in our areas, with your friends, with your family. There is power, authority, and status. There's a struggle and jockeying. What about at work with you and your boss? You're like, oh, why do they like this? If you didn't care about power and authority, you wouldn't care if people told you what to do. All right, whatever, I'll just do it, right? No, we care. How can you tell me what to do? Children say that to their parents. Parents say that to the children. What do you're this 15-year-old kid telling me, who's 40 years old, 45 years old, how to live? Come on, you don't know. It's power, authority, and status, and we're jockeying for it all the time. How many times have you had a group of friends, a new friend comes into the mix, and you wonder to yourself, and you struggle, Hey, I thought I was their best friend, but they don't talk to me anymore. They spend more time with, oh, you get envy and jealousy, things that you want from other people. You see the status of people and you look at it according to how much materials they have, and we start to want more things. We have a deprivation of social needs all the time going on in our hearts. And this is why when you see a lot of these movies, it makes sense. It might seem unrealistic, but people will give up and sell out for money, for power, for wealth. Oh, but if I have this, I can do so much more. Oh, I don't need my wife anymore. I can just find a new wife. Oh, if I had all this, if I had this. And we look on Instagram and we look on all these social media outlets and we get jealous and envious of people who own so many things. And we're looking at our status in the world and we get caught up in these things. It may not be at that level where Jesus is given the entire world, but to us, that is our world. It is. Our world is our friends. Our world is our family. It is our work. It is our school. And we struggle with this a lot too. It is the deprivation of power and authority, or our social needs, where we fit in this world. What is our status in our groups, in our areas? And this is what Satan uses. Satan will bring up the envy and jealousy and pride in all these three temptations, all three situations, to make us fall into temptation, to get tested by others, tested by God, tested by your family. That's why it's such a big thing that we have to understand, like Christ, we have to be so firm, planted, and have that perfect foundation in God, so that no matter what happens, no matter how much the foundation of the earth itself shakes beneath me, I will never lose trust. I will never lose doubt. And I'll never be that person that sells out for any of these things, because God is in control and He rules all things. And when we get to that stage, we too will be able to overcome those three temptations that are happening in our life too. All right? So I hope you guys really enjoyed today's topic. Would love to hear your honest comments. Just write it down. I want to hear it, and I'm going to respond to every single comment. I will. I've done it so far, but of course, I'm not getting hundreds of them, but I'm responding to every single one so far. So if you can, go ahead, leave a comment below. All right, this is Pastor Sky over here on Espresso with Sky. Everyone have a wonderful week, and these are my two sidekicks. See you guys again, and toodaloo, bidoo, bidoo, bidoo. Oh, that sounds so stupid. Bye-bye. I'm so dumb.